Ave, faraway friends, you have arrived at the Port of Dark. Today, we are going to spend some time with Randy, who plays Marcus on the main table.
Hello.
And you can even do it in character the whole time if you want to, Randy.
I could, but I won't. As tempting as that is.
As tempting as that is. So, thank you for carving some time out on this busy Father's Day and coming here. My first question that I always like to ask active players is, how does it feel to be at an empty table?
Empty. Like it's always like so full when we get here. Like everybody's sort of settling in and getting together.
Bustling,
and moving back and forth, checking mics and whatnot. So it just feels quiet in here.
It's, I think it weirded Donnie out a little bit at the beginning of the interview, to tell you the truth. Yeah. But yeah. For those of the viewers who don't know who you are, who is Randy Ruiz? Let's start there.
I guess I'm just an old longtime friend of yours who was brought to the table as hey, we're doing this little thing and I would like you to come. And I was like, well, it'll take me about 30 seconds to decide on that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm there. Living in California at the time, it was just kind of like got to get everything together, all my ducks in a row before I came out here.
It was a big move.
Yeah, it was.
There's a lot going on then.
It was a good move. It was much needed. California's great for a lot of different things, but it can get a little stagnant after a while. And I was really looking forward to a new change of pace, seeing my friends, just meeting new people, seeing new things. And this was an experience that I'd kind of wanted to do for a long time, and it just sort of kind of fell in my lap when we were talking about it.
For sure. I mean, you and I had been talking about gaming again for years. How long were you out in Cali?
I left here in 2007.
Yeah.
And I got back here in 2023. So
it was a hot minute.
16 years or so, give or take.
It was a good while.
And then prior to that, 3 years here before I went back.
We did game, right. We did game sometimes on the Mud multi-user dungeon, which is like, for those of you who don't know, it's like it's kind of a remnant from a different era, but a text-based reality, which that one happened to be the Dark Sun campaign setting, basically from like roughly 2nd edition, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, something like early 90s was when they actually created it.
Yeah.
Based on the Dark Sun universe, and then just sort of modified it to more day-to-day play.
That's a good description, because like literally everything gets played out on a Mud.
Yeah, again.
Yeah, every single sparring session, every single all of it has to be played out. So
lots of sparring.
Lots of everything, lots of repetitive stuff. So we had some time that had kind of been on again, off again, but this was the first table session that we had done, table campaign that we had done since you left.
Yeah.
So it was a long time.
Yeah, and I didn't actually play too many table sessions back in Cali. I mean.
You played some with Naya and Travis, yeah.
Yeah,
and that was about it.
That was about it.
Yeah, I mean, old friends of ours, yeah.
And they were great, but you kind of spoiled me. There's some things I look for in gaming that a lot of the storytellers and GMs that I play with just can't quite meet. And when I start getting frustrated, I start losing interest. And when I start losing interest, it just kind of moves on from there. I've never lost interest in your games, so.
Well, thank you. I was going to wait until question 4 to tell you this, but. You and I both have an interesting relationship with compliments, so I'm going to tell you, just be ready to be complimented. Yeah.
I've gotten better about them. I've gotten better about them.
No, you have. So what position does gaming occupy in your life? However you want to answer that.
Probably third. There's my friends and relationships, there's work, and then there's gaming. But my friends and relationships often mingle in with gaming, so it kind of...
Especially right now.
Yeah, when most of my friends are part of the game crew.
Yeah.
Either in the back of house or front, so it's really neat. So I'd say about third, fourth, something like that. Work is important, of course, but...
Well, yeah.
Skills to pay the bills.
Got to pay the bills, yeah. Would you say that it's entertainment for you? Would you say that it's, kind of armchair philosophy for you? Like, what is it? Wargaming for you? Like, how does it hit you that way?
It is actually kind of a little everything.
Okay.
Like, there's the investigation into the new world that you've created. There's the interactions between the characters that we're doing as we go, not only the PCs, but the NPCs. There is like philosophy on what the nature of religion is with Marcus specifically, the nature of it, how it plays into everything. And now that I'm older in life, I can actually see a lot of the nuances that I would have missed back in my early 20s.
To that point, Randy, I've said this off camera before, but I just want to like officially say this. You were an excellent player already, like even in your 20s. I don't think that you could have done this character justice back then.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely, and I appreciate that. But I really do agree with that. Because, man, life experiences, there's no accounting for life experience. It's like you either have it or you don't. So
this isn't on the list, but what's the single biggest shift that you've had that you feel like you could embody Marcus now that would have been challenging or possible before?
My relationship to my family is probably one of them, because family is such an important aspect to Marcus. And I mean, I could always mimic it back when I was a kid, but I didn't really feel it. And now I understand. Like, I mean, to me, Alba is as much of a living person as Donnie playing Titus. So it's just like I can feel my family's love through that bond that we have.
And that comes out on those scenes. Yeah. That really comes out on those
It's so
scenes.
easy to play with. They're so easy to play, man. There's that. And there is, I don't know, just my ability just to like settle into the character. It feels like a comfortable shoe as opposed to something I'm sort of breaking in and moving along with,
And you were that way with him quickly.
It took a minute, but yeah. I mean, the first session I was terrified of my accent, so I didn't actually really talk too much. I was trying not to talk too much, but as things progressed more and more, the more I interacted with you guys, the easier it became, And now I can break into Marcus' voice or not Marcus' voice. Or,
At the drop of a hat, yes.
Pretty much, right?
I can attest to that.
Yeah. So with that, and then there's the philosophy that you and I have talked about before. It's just, there's a lot of small detail stuff that goes on in the course of our games that can be missed or overlooked or whatnot. And because gaming takes such a large part of my life at that point, like third in place, there's a lot of just like, I wonder what this would happen. I wonder about that.
Man, you are already, it's funny, Randy, because the next three questions are all you've already basically teed up the next three questions. You're already doing the thing of just like anticipating where I'm going. And I love that. So I'm going to ask these three questions, and then once we get through with them, if there's something else, please, that you want to add to your process, let's get into that. So I'm doing the little side project of this Jam's Journey. And on the very first one, I went back and I listened to it today to make sure that I had it correctly in my head. And I basically did, where I said, like, I should do something about theme with Randy. So we're going to talk about theme, and you already named one of the themes for Marcus, which is very clearly family.
Right.
So the next question I had was, and you actually started to answer just now. So you have I'll say it this way. Most people don't know that you basically created Pollux. I gave you a very, very loose sketch of it. I knew who, like, the quote-unquote big bad of Pollux was, who the villain was. But other than that, I mean, you fleshed out the daily rituals of it. You fleshed out your family. You made a lot of, like, Marcus One Hand. You came up with all these stories. It was like, mother's milk. I mean, it just flowed right out of you. How do you as a player develop that? That's like veteran GM level of just like deep creative improv. Not just improv, not just tossing one-liners back and forth, but understanding how to almost seamlessly, honestly, fit in these different characters into the larger world. That's a rare talent.
Thanks.
I've gamed with a lot of people, and very few players can do that. And most GMs, you're better than that than most GMs are at doing that. So how do you develop that?
Generally, I start by looking at the world as a whole, as what we have. And like with Pollux, it was pretty simple. We were just a farming community, very like 100 people strong, right?
Yeah.
But each of the
100.
Yeah, about give or take. But each of the people to me kind of feel real. And then once I start thinking about them, I try to put myself in their position to see how they feel, what they would feel what certain circumstances in their lives would give and whatnot. I like it. It makes each of the characters feel like they have a vibrant part of this world that we live in, even though they are NPCs, even though they probably won't be brought up many times.
Right.
Like, I think Marcus One Hand was on our prologue, and we haven't really talked about him since that point. But he still exists, and I know I've commented on it to you, like when we were just chatting quietly to ourselves. So it's just, I guess it's really just a matter of trying to put myself in their position, because I mean, feelings are feelings, and they're really important, and a lot of people just forget about the feelings, right?
So on the last little GM's journey that I did, I said exactly that. That if I had one piece of advice to give players from me as a player to another person as a player, it's to put yourself in that person's position, and then all sorts of things flow from.
That's funny. I actually haven't seen that one yet, so yeah, so that's pretty cute.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different people in our world that we come across to in real life, and every single one of them has a story, and every single one of them, like we've talked before, they're heroes in their own story.
Yep.
So it's like trying to understand what they would be about, how they would interact with my family specifically or not, you know. That's kind of one of the things I really enjoy. Plus the time that we've spent playing Armageddon, that was another one where we were just like, there was a lot of like...
The mud.
Yeah.
The mud we were talking about earlier.
Yes. The mud, where we were basically making backstories up for our characters. There would be times that I had to leave for like a year because of real life. And when that happened, I had to come up with intricate stories that were believable, but still like in the realm, well, I had to take some time off. I'm so sorry. In that time, I had a baby.
Yeah, right.
And then just trying to attribute like names, activities, things that they would have done, how they would have grown to give them a little bit more substance, you know. That's kind of one of the fun parts of this world for me.
It's funny because one of the few areas that you and I have friction over, I've kind of created a monster in that, you know, like I always tell the players, your job as the player is to zealously advocate for your character. And you zealously advocate for your character.
I try to advocate for other characters too.
You do.
Like,
you do.
You've done great. Do something. Say something about that.
Well, like when you were giving all the upgrades to Pollux, and I was like, okay, we're at about the point now, Randy.
Oh, I could have gone. I could have gone on more, but for a low culture or for a low tech place, I'm like, all right, well, that's about as far as it goes. It was fun coming up with ideas, though. Well, like totally think I would have interacted with the mud if I could have done that. Been like, okay, well, we're low tech here, this and this and this, and let's put that all together.
So is it fair to say? I mean, pretty clearly, the world is like it's a living, breathing world in your head. Yeah. That you don't just show up, play the game, and then don't think about the character until
a very fair statement.
Okay.
But to also be fair, that's the way I've looked at all of the games that we've ever played with. Like every game that you and I specifically have played in has been that kind of vibrant, beautiful world that continues on even after we're not.
Again, thank you. I mean, I try. I often feel that I'm falling short of the mark because I have all of these characters and all of these stories in my head, and just some tiny fraction of that actually I feel like can get through, and then it's, you know, further muddled by like not a professional voice actor, so struggling with these different accents and trying to portray these characters and like that. So I'm glad to hear that that's been your experience of it.
I can't even imagine like having all of that in mind, having the chronology of everything that goes on, and still being able to pull it out as almost seamlessly as you do. I mean, sometimes we have to go back a little bit every once in a while, but I mean, when you're dealing with an entire world, it makes sense. So I can't even imagine. So I'm happy with what I do.
I know. I really appreciate that. The next question I had was, kind of got into theme. I think this is probably a good place to bring up Matthew, actually. So Matthew was your seminal vampire character, Vampire the Masquerade character that we played together when we were in our 20s. And that character's themes, I don't know, I was actually thinking about this today, Randy, when I was committing these questions down. Like, I had some sense of what I wanted to ask you, but I was actually writing it down today. I don't know, he was never like a bad guy, so for me to say like that his character arc was one long redemption story, it doesn't exactly feel right, but it did have a lot of facets of a redemption story, of trying to be better, of trying to push yourself into places that the world doesn't is pushing back against you, that sort of thing. So I don't know, what theme do you feel like you were exploring? And there's a reason I'm going into this, and then we'll get to Marcus, but what...
Initially, I built Matthew as an assassin-style character, so he was easy to kill, like making easy kills and whatnot. It was pretty quickly on that I realized that I just wasn't interested in playing that kind of character. And then once you added the humanity aspect of the more humanity you have, the more actions you get, I started looking at it from like a tit for tat. If I'm a good guy, I'll have more time to do things.
Because the vampires wake up earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then once I started actually getting, and remember, I was in my early 20s, so it was just like the praise was kind of important to me. You're doing a great thing. You did so good.
Sure.
But after a while, I just stopped caring about the praise, and I just started doing what felt natural. And it was really a natural progression from you're a killer into you're a protector into you're a loving man with family of
who created his own family, basically, by the end of that.
Right. That was really fun. Really fun.
And that's kind of why I'm bringing that up, because that character, one of the things that I realized, and I don't think in all the years we've talked about this I've ever made this point before, Matthew was the only character, Odo to an extent. So out of 6 characters, there were 2 characters who kind of got out alive, so to speak. I mean, everybody's undead, but who kind of got out alive, whereas the other 4 characters, including some very competent, very well played characters like David and David were doomed. I mean, they by their own actions they were doomed. And it's interesting to me, and that's where I'll pick the thread up, that you ended your final era with Matthew was about family, even though there was some romance in there. Really, it was about the family unit, like with Rain. To me, that was still about the family that you chose versus the family that you had been
Rain,
given.
Carol, all the ghouls, like all of them. It was important.
And with Marcus, the theme, one of the themes is family. I was trying to think of what the companion theme was for him, and I have 2 different ways of saying it. And I kind of wanted to bounce this off of you, and then I'll finally ask the damn question. Do you think creating community or building bridges? What do you think is a better way of, or either of those work?
They're both pretty important, actually. I'm not. It's kind of hard to say one has priority over the other, because communities tend to build bridges as they move out. So it's just like, when they came to Geramentum, it was like, we have 40 people here, like 15 of them kids. We just uprooted ourselves. We got to come to this new place, and now it's like, now we got to meet people. We have all these options available that we never had before. So I guess building bridges would probably be.
That's what I was. That's what I was leaning toward. That's what I was leaning toward. Although, obviously, as a natural outgrowth of that, you have community. Once you have those relationships and connections established. So, I wanted to ask it this way. So, your ability to consistently intuit themes, to identify and continually reinforce themes is really remarkable. Like, it's really unusual, again, with players. Everybody plays with themes, even if they don't know it. But oftentimes when players talk about, I'm not feeling my character, or I don't like the story arc, or I'm having a hard time connecting with her, or whatever, a lot of times it's because they're drifting off of their theme. Or they don't know how to shift that theme if they're done exploring one and they want to explore something else. Like, they don't know how to shift that organically. That's a whole conversation, but I just wanted to say that. Whereas in the context of, you are so good at intuiting what those themes are and then identifying those, so you and I have never directly spoken about what Marcus's themes are as a character, other than when we made his when we made his theme song.
Correct.
So what is that? What I wanted to ask was, how does that feel like to you?
Organic. Like, it just, everything that comes from him, I've always built the foundation of everything he has based on his family, and then I moved out from there. So it always really felt kind of organic growth to me, where, he started off believing, he always has believed, But as we've shaped and played and done more, that belief has taken shape and solidified into something firm. This last game session obviously changed some things.
No, it's going to rock him. Yeah.
But even still, that core of his belief.
It doesn't take his family away, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like with a lot I've seen the same thing with other players for all the games that we played and stuff like that who just can't connect or not. It feels like a lot of the times they focus on what they can do as opposed to who they are. Does that make any sense?
Oh, that's actually some good wisdom.
Yeah, so once I realized who Marcus was at his core, then it's just easy to like build upon that, and that's kind of where he is right about now. I mean, again, notwithstanding what's going to rock him, but it's still inside of him, he still is a devout believer, even if the ledger that he's paying his worship to is false. You know, that makes sense.
It does. No, it does. Well, because I mean, he follows Hearth and Home, the light of Hearth and Home, so it's God, if you will, for him. Quailthon for him is very much embodied in the people around him, I feel like, as opposed to something removed and abstract.
Yeah.
You know,
Like what apparently the Stormwarner is telling us right about now. It's an abstract thing. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm so sorry. But everybody I know, we believe in Quailthon and we love him. So that's going to be a whole conversation.
It will be. And then how about building bridges? What does that feel like for you? How did you, so you could have taken family as a central theme and then been a ruthless bastard. And then everything is for my family, screw everybody else. You know, even if it's a large family, even if it like includes extended family, but that's still only 40, 50, 60 people, whatever. And then anybody outside of that, screw them.
So we're kind of like a clan, just
yeah. It's more like an insular clan, like the way that Armageddon clans in Armageddon would run. That's not the approach you took. So how did you arrive there, and what does that feel like doing that in a world that is objectively more hostile than many of the worlds that you have played before as a player?
Right. Originally, it was the Kithki that started that trend because they were so close to each other. They were such a family-based people where they had their large sepus. All of them considered themselves family, multiple partners, multiple children, et cetera, et cetera. Once I saw how they interacted, it was really easy for me to understand that, hey, you know, my daughter really likes baking. How about she goes over to Publia and starts learning the trade like that so she's not locked into it? That bridge that from my daughter to the bakery will then turn into bridges elsewhere as she starts learning, getting to know the people, they start understanding her.
For sure.
And that's really kind of, the Kithki were probably the first thing that I realized. I mean, I always knew I kind of wanted to do stuff with my family, expand them, give them more opportunities than a farming village really could give them, right? But it wasn't until we came to a place like Jerimentum where there was a population of 4,000, 3,000 now currently, but 4,000, where the possibilities were limitless. And then add to that, they're allowed to learn how to read and write. They're allowed to worship.
Yeah, impossible. Yeah, that would have been impossible.
So once I started actually expanding that and giving my family, not my people, but my family, the choice of what they want to do, not just what they were forced to do, then it was real easy for me to just start building those bridges outward.
So would you say that if you had arrived in Jerimentum, and Jerimentum was a lot more, because you played in the Leptis Regime game, on the offline Leptis Regime game. So let's say that Jerimentum was mini Leptis Regime. It was paranoid, it was backstabbing, you know, the leadership was parsimonious and secretive and furtive and all of that. Would you still have run with the building bridges theme, or would that have morphed into something else, do you think?
It would have probably morphed into more reclusive building bridges. Like I would have picked and choose the bridges that we chose.
Much more cautious.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not going to send my daughter out to a place, you know,
that she gets kidnapped.
It's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like I feel like I as a player and Marcus as a character has some pretty good instincts when it comes to people. Generally, like he can tell that this is a good one, this is a bad one, stay away from that, right? So if we were in Leptis Regime coming to this situation, it would have been a lot of like, really, who are you kind of feel before I actually just opened up the arms. But the Kithki, again, were just so...
Yeah, no, they're powerful. Yeah,
so,
they're very powerful. They're half the population.
Yeah, we'd been a lot more insular, a lot more to ourselves and protective. But I still think that at the end of the day, we would have had more options available to us.
So that right there is it occurs to me, that's a very good example of how to roll with your theme, but adapt to the circumstances of the campaign as they unfold. What you just said. So the reason that I'm doing these interviews isn't just to chat. As much as I adore you, Randy, it isn't just to chat with the various players. It's also so that people who watch this get something of value and that they can use for themselves. And I think that's an important way, that even if the theme isn't coming out the way that you want it to, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that you have to find some way to weave that in. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Here we go. So one of my personal favorites, you are extremely proactive as a player. You drive long-term strategy in a way that's beautiful to watch in motion. I usually have this, but off the top of my head today, I can't remember the episode number where you went to Livia and you basically laid out, 3 really important initiatives. She already had one in her head, and I forget exactly what that flow was, but maybe you had 2 and she had 1, something like that. You also know me as a GM, which is the NPCs are never going to be your saviors. So they can be your helpers and they can be your strong allies, but they're never, if you just sit around and wait for the NPCs to do things, you will never win the campaign. You'll never succeed in what the aim of the campaign is. So how do you accomplish this, and what does it feel like as you're laying out and you're being that proactive? Because it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. Sometimes it's like, oh, that was a great idea, but no, it didn't quite work out with. So the way I generally approach most of the problems that we have is I start at the end of the problem and I work my way back to where we are now. So it's like if I realize that, like the conversation with Livia, 1,000 of our troops just left. We have one centurion of like Kithki left over, and that's about it, or Legion, whatever they were. I knew that we needed allies. I knew that we needed them quickly because we didn't have enough manpower to hold it off against everybody. If all of our people were here, that's great. But so I started with that problem being the foremost. How do we stop them? We need allies. Let's talk here, here, and here. And then it was just a matter of like deciding on which allies that we needed to go to. That's kind of my process for everything. So I usually start at the end, work my way back in a non-linear fashion, whereas a lot of people that I know start from the front and work forward. I just found it a lot easier for myself when I'm thinking of strategy to think about where we need to be as opposed to where we are now.
Kind of like when you were trying to figure out where the family, like, that's why it's important to see what they want to do.
Exactly.
Because then you can say, okay, if you want to do this, then let's work backward from there and see what the steps are. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what does it feel like while you're doing that?
It feels like a little bit of trial and error because I'll go through a lot of different permutations on so once I decide on a person or the track, then I'll have to decide on who's connected most to those places, and then I'll have to decide if they're going to be the right person for this. Like, I don't know, between Livia and Rutilius and Titus, who would I go to in this situation? Probably Livia first, then Rutilius, then Titus. I mean, because Titus is great, but in a different situation where it was a war matter, I would start with Titus, then Livia, then Rutilius. Maybe backwards with Rutilius, whatever. The point is, it's a matter of choosing the best person for it, and the more people I meet, the more I have an idea of how to weave them together. A lot of the times it feels pretty right when I come or stumble across or decide on a course of action. This feels like the correct course. So we're going to go with this until it proves that it's not, or that it stops feeling that way. It's served me well in your games many years, like for many years. A lot of the relationships I had, I probably wouldn't have actually had it if I hadn't started at the end and worked back.
Interesting. That's interesting that you emphasize the relationships, which I agree with.
Relationships are everything in a game like this.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, we're burning through these. What's your? No, I want to put in. So I asked the Discord channel for some questions, and Havoc. Yay, Havoc!
Hey, Havoc.
He gave us a question. So he asks, what is your favorite player memory with another character? And how did that change your experience in game with that one character moving forward?
Player and game character.
And we can break that into 2 questions if you want. So what's your favorite player? What's your favorite memory with another character? Maybe, I guess, scene would be another way to say it.
With the direct player, it was probably the Merrick and the Jasmine scene where I was sitting with them, and we were talking about the situation. I didn't know all the stuff that was going on with Merrick at that point, but she asked me to heal him. I was sort of finding my own path in the healing path.
Right,
You know?
and he's finding his own path.
Exactly.
There's an interesting parallel going on with those characters right now. That's in place. I won't say too much about that, but there are definitely some parallels between those two characters, and there are also some intersections between those two characters. But
I felt like I was given some insight into the way the Kithki culture worked with that, like understanding the door was there when it shouldn't have been there, or understanding
it was a bit unnatural for them. Yeah.
I mean, I've always kind of felt that if Marcus wasn't a practitioner of Quaelathon, he would have been a believer in the Great Mother herself. You know, they have a very similar viewpoints on a lot of different things. But that was probably one of my favorite interactions with people, just because it was real and it felt real, and I could feel Jasmine's need that you were portraying from her, and I could feel the uneasiness that Merrick had when he was explaining the situation. Like, it was a lot of stuff, and I know that it was a very brief conversation right at the very end of the game session that
yeah.
so we really weren't able to get too deeply into it, but just that brief bit of time was really cool to me.
That's interesting, Rennie. That's not. I didn't know what your answer was going to be, but that's actually not what I would have expected.
A second close one was probably the Titus situation, where he was talking to in Pulux when he came to rescue us in the first session.
Very first session.
Yeah, and he was talking to Minor.
Sextus Minor.
Yeah, Sextus Minor. And like he's like blah blah blah. A patrician to a non-patrician showing his power without actually having to flex. Yeah.
But I can see why you would choose the Merrick and Jasmine one, because that one, even though you were present and you were part of the scene, you were much more an observer.
Yeah.
In that scene.
And I was still finding my footing with him anyway. This, I felt very much in control of Marcus. I felt him when I was talking to them about this, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of the same way that I felt, during the Bend the Knee episode, I felt Marcus. It wasn't like I was playing him. It felt like these were decisions he was making, and I was just going along with it because he was making those decisions, you know.
Can you explain that a little more? I understand what you mean. But
I mean, tactically, I still had to make the decisions I made tactically, right? But when he was screaming out that he knew how to get them off this island, when he was choosing when to bend the knee, or if he was even going to bend the knee as easily as he did, he's like, well, I need to save my people. That's it. You know, I didn't want to do that. And of course I didn't. I was just like, but when it came down to life or death, it's like, it's always going to be life, you know? So he was making that decision, and I was just like, oh, well, I guess he's going to do that. Or even better, talking to or getting Avad off that cross. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, we've had this discussion before.
Yeah, although not on camera.
Yeah, that's true. But it's like I had Capio to the left of me, and like telling me no. Everybody else on the verge of death with us, and I'm just like, I still had to save him, or I had at least try to save him. You know,
that moment. So I'm gonna go on record and say that I guess I did mention it, but like at the time, but like that. Avad's fate was sealed.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind as the GM, he was done. And what was going to be left of him after that situation, you would have seen, but it wouldn't have been much. And then that would have gone on. But I mean, it basically was steps on a path for him, leading to, ultimately his demise. And that the fact that you were able to Aikido your way out of that situation when the group was at its absolute weakest. I mean, the Fellowship, even during the Battle of the Bloody Tower, y'all had never received that bad of a beatdown, ever. No. Like, not even close.
No, not even.
Not even close.
I mean, he was down, 3 times himself?
Yeah, three times.
One Emeric,
I mean, arguably the strongest person initially got beaten down and was making death saves and was failing death saves. I mean, that was a bad. Merrick is tough as nails, and Merrick, your bruiser side was all.
Scary.
I promised I did not intend for that, but it just worked out that way that the bruisers are all on this side with the swords, and the lovers are all on the side with the Colin fruit.
it was one of those situations where I, as Randy, was proud of myself for doing it because we were scot-free. We were done. The combat was over. We didn't have anything else to do. There was no more real
You could have just
threat,
said nothing.
and then just moved on our merry
Yeah.
way. But it was just like, I've played in games with you before where I'd said nothing when I should have said something, and I felt real bad about it. And there are, even to this day, I can still think of at least 3 different occasions.
I'm going to go ahead and bring up the iconic one because I think it's important and instructive about like why people game. So when you were playing Matthew, and I won't try to explain all of it, but basically there was a hostile group of vampires that were a little bit more powerful than you. Like fighting them would have been really, really dangerous, especially with your character probably would have been okay, but some of the weaker members of the groups in that game are called coteries. They might have been destroyed. Like it was a real that was a real situation. And basically to get along with them, not just you, but the entire group allowed them, but Matthew was like the heroic one out of that group for sure, allowed the poor night watchman to get savaged. Wrong place, wrong time, and they tore home due to part. And that came up for that character again and again and again. I mean, that became like a significant block for him achieving Golconda, which is like in that game system is kind of their version of enlightenment. So it was pretty striking to me, even in the moment, Randy, with that context, that you were doing something where I was like, man, you've played this perfectly. You've actually gotten them out of a deadly situation where at least Titus and Wesa were going to die. At least, like they were dead. If you had done nothing, or if you had kind of just mum-shuffed, as we say, and been ineffective, those 2 characters were dead. KPO probably would have tried to save Nalishli, so I don't know how that may or may not. But she
did.
Yeah. And Merrick was a toss-up, but at least 2 of your members would have been dead, including your leader. Having gotten out of that, you're then putting yourself back in danger, potentially, but it was to do the right thing, and you did.
And my jaw was clenching so hard. Like I went back and watched that scene. It was clenching so hard not to say anything, and I kept looking over at KB. He was like, "No, don't," just like.
And Toby was doing just having a master class of like nonverbal communication. It was strong. Like the way he was bearing down on you was strong.
But it would have felt like a betrayal to Marcus. Like Marcus always stands up for who he believes is like weak and needed the help, and this guy dealt with us in fair spirit. Like he thought that he was doing his people a service.
A service, yeah.
Right, and it's not him that betrayed us, that betrayed his people. It was us that betrayed him. So it's like it would have doubly betrayed. I would have felt like a double betrayal of Marcus. I couldn't stop. And as it turns out, it was good. Yeah,
that was impressive. That was impressive.
I couldn't even look at the roll either. Just like,
I remember. I remember.
Dude, it was crazy, man. I mean, I'm notoriously bad for my rolls.
Yeah.
On top of that, I'm just like.
Much like we're trying to rehab you now because you were not that bad back in the day. You were like average. You were like average back in the day.
Yeah, well, we played with the D10 system, so it was a lot easier with that. And you could sort of like not fudge the dice, but just like, well, I've got 8 die pool for this, so that's a lot easier. But I mean, it was at the D20, and my D20s are shitty. Like, they're so bad.
They've gotten better. They've gotten better.
They've like taken a little bit of the nasty mojo out and put a little bit of the good stuff in, but.
How did that change your interactions with Merrick moving forward? I mean, to me, it's obvious, but I want to hear it in your words.
I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like, there's been this ebb and flow in our relationship with each other. Like, sometimes I think that he was just like, dude, why would you do that? I'm like, calling on Ruff. I'm just like, I was so mad at him for that.
They're very different characters. Yeah.
And then on the other hand, I feel like I understand the struggle that he's going through, and I kind of feel like sympathetic to his plight a little bit more, like, whatever. It's really hard to say. I felt a connection to him at that point, and I still feel that connection to him now. Like when we had that conversation in his room, and to this point forward. I mean, every character does some things that I find questionable at times, right? And just like they're going to find things that I do questionable.
Sure.
But I think for the most part, I felt like it strengthened the bond that Merrick and Marcus have. Aside from the fact,
for sure. Yeah.
Aside from the fact that it's like they're both the oldest characters, like the oldest characters in the actual Fellowship.
They're full adults.
Yeah.
They're well into adulthood.
It's like I guess I kind of find like a kinship with him because not only is he Kithki, he's also probably the paterfamilias or one of them of his family because he's the oldest, and like he does a lot of things, and it's just like I don't know. There was definitely a kinship that grew because of that one interaction, and it made me want to help him more because of that. Right.
So there's an interesting dynamic between them. Mm-hmm. I won't say I've never seen it before, but I have never seen it played out this way, which is having one player being something of a spiritual advisor for another player character. And not when it, like I said, I've seen it before, but it's usually when one character is like in an official capacity with another one, and Marcus isn't. Like, he's not an official beacon of the church. He's not. I mean, effectively is, but he doesn't have the title of like community leader or patrician or like anything along those lines. So it's been interesting to watch that relationship, even when it's been contentious, to develop between those two characters. Where and not to give anything away on that, but like, Corey and I were talking, he'd come to me and we talked some about kind of Merrick's internal process and how that might be shifting. So, yeah, I'm trying to parse this because, like I said, I don't want to give anything away.
You know me, I'm going to latch on.
Both of them, no, you're really into it. Now, I have to watch what I say with you because, I just give you one little nugget and you're off and running. No, it goes back to family, like how they both relate to family and what the priorities are, and also what the definition of family is. Because Merrick is very invested. I'm not telling you anything your character doesn't know. He's very invested in the dream, whereas for Marcus, actually, that's a good follow-up question to that. So there's a lot of talk of the dream. It's definitely the thing that holds Gerumentum together, even in the darkest of times. What does the dream mean to Marcus?
Security for my family. Like, security for my family. Everything else is like, the dream is great. I love it. It's great, right? Does the dream do anything for my family if it's successful? Absolutely. Yeah. It affords them opportunities. It gives them a chance at life that they would never have had in Kulux. I am fully fighting for that. It's like, I'm not a fanatic about it.
Right.
Because I understand that, things change and the tides ebb and flow, whatever. But it's just security for my family. And at the end of the day, that's the foundation I built on. So everything goes back to what my family can. I'm not going to do underhanded, shitty crap. I'm not going to do like sneaky stuff to like get my family ahead. But I will do everything in my power to be a just, honest man while pushing my family ahead to what they had. And those who came with us too. I know that I make a point of it that they're all my kin, but like the people who actually left with us, they chose to like leave behind everything that they did and knew. They could have stayed just fine and probably would have been like woven into the new fabric of Pulux, but they chose to. They chose to leave with us. They chose to believe in me. And at that point, he didn't even believe in himself. So all these people just came up and like, okay, well, now you're part of my family too. I got to protect you just as much.
Yeah, when I say family, that's a good point, actually. When I say family, at least in my mind, I include essentially everyone who made the diaspora up to Gerumentum.
I do as well.
Yeah.
I do as well.
What's your favorite part of playing Marcus?
Well, 2 weeks or a month ago, I would have said just my unshakable faith. It's easy to have faith in the moment. It's harder to have faith over a long period of time. And I know that I've mentioned this before, where it's like the only real concrete proof that I had that Quaelathon existed was the sun coming up every single day. He never gave us anything. He never did anything for us. It was just the sun coming up. So I really appreciated the faith that I had with him.
So he believed deeply and loved Quaelathon before he had anything from him.
Yeah, anything. I mean, I could have gone my entire life without getting anything from him.
Right. He didn't get to reroll ones.
Yeah, exactly. The little thing.
The little thing. Yeah, he did the little thing.
or like Tezcatli doesn't speak to me in
Right.
my
Right.
dreams, or
Right.
Nope.
Nope.
like the waves don't crash over and I feel a kinship with the with the rain. Like what? None of that. But recently,
I love you, Randy.
it is what it is. Although recently, my favorite part of Marcus has been delving into the not so much the politics of Germentum, because I care about everybody, including Livia. I mean, Livia is probably my favorite NPC next to Alba. It's just because I feel, even though we're vastly different people,
yeah.
we have a same way of looking at things, a similarity in the way that we look at things, and I can appreciate that on a grand scale. But my favorite part of Marcus so far is the world building. Like, every time I go out and have the song with my people, and more people join us, I love that. Every time that I have a conversation with Andros, are you a prideful man?
Yeah.
And
That always cracks me up.
And we kind of spar back and forth, and I can see that slowly and surely I'm winning him over little by little, and more as it comes, depending on how the rest of this adventure goes. I love that part. I like knowing more about the city, about my environment, and about the world outside of my environment. That is my favorite part of any game that you've ever ran, but this specifically, like, it's fun. Like, it's so fun. Like, I'm always scribbling notes down and doing my thing.
You take copious notes.
And because it all connects. And there have been times that you've said something at the very beginning of a game, hasn't said a single word about it for 3 or 4 years, and then suddenly it comes back up. It's like, oh, I have that note right here,
So
that.
Man, you're really in my head today, Randy, in a good way. So one of the things that, I always come back to this, but like the differences between running a home game and a streaming game. So like in a home game, I basically can indulge all those impulses as much as I want. The last D&D campaign that we got done running, technically didn't finish it, but got done running about 7 years. And yeah, there was stuff from the basically month 2 of that campaign that in year 7 were relevant again. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of me being me. On a streaming game, it is a lot to ask a audience member to keep track of something from 2 years ago. Like, that is a lot. So I've never seen this, oddly, I've never seen this addressed, and maybe I just am ignorant and I haven't looked all enough, but like the difficulty of conveying that it's one thing to convey it to people in the room, it's another thing to convey it to an audience who doesn't have the benefit of being able to ask clarifying questions or being able to read certain, like, even though we have excellent, like, I think we have some excellent camera work, but it's just impossible to catch everything all the time, So anyway, I really appreciate, like, I love that I can pass the ball downfield and I know you're going to catch it. Like that's deeply satisfying to me. Especially with our resident lore mistress gone. Anika, who was just flawless with that.
Sad day.
I mean, flawless with that stuff. It's hard because this is a pretty dense campaign in terms of like material,
And for 3-hour chunks at a time, so it's not even like we get
short session. For us, those are short.
Yeah,
sessions.
we were playing for like 6-7 hours.
6-7. Yeah.
Every single Saturday.
Yeah.
From like noon until 7 or 8. So,
Yeah.
So we have 3 hours instead, and there are 6 people.
And there's 6 people
who have their own special things that they want to do, and so yeah.
Yeah, and we're portraying, and I mean, not right now, but like we're often portraying an entire small city, too. So it's like there's just there's a lot there. Okay, so you would say the world building now, the ongoing world building now?
Yeah. I mean, I really like the social connections. I was going to be talking to Olivia here soon about the houses themselves. I know I brought it up to her at one point, but I need to understand the tapestry that I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. And Marcus feels that very keenly when I'm playing him. Just like there is so much out there that I don't understand. He's not stupid, but he is ignorant. A little less so than he was when he first came to Pulex, but like there's an ignorance that I need to address.
I like the fact that I feel like you're playing his, he has a 12 intelligence, which in this game system already gives you +1, so it's out by definition, it's above average. But he has an 18 wisdom, so he has a deep insight into the workings of the human heart, into interpersonal connections, the ebb and flow of emotions, et cetera, all of those things. So I feel like you bring a lot of that as a player.
I try.
To it.
I try. I think it's kind of, as along with healing, I think it's kind of one of my jobs, really. Like, we're not going to thank you for doing your job, but,
right.
But I kind of feel like it's
Randy,
what I build.
You feel like, I've said this before, but actually maybe not exactly this way. Marcus feels to me like a father first and a cleric second.
Yeah.
Or a whatever you want to call it, like a member of his community, a member of his family first, and then the superpowers, as it were, just kind of, they're great and they're essential for success, but they aren't really definitional for you.
No. It's funny, though, recently, well, not even recently, maybe last 10 game sessions or so that we've been playing, I've been feeling that
it's starting to come in.
Yeah,
more.
They're starting to actually join together, because it's not only a father to my people and my family, but it's also a father to the people who are looking for guidance, who are trying to find their own path in Quailethon's light. It's just...
I'm excited to see that.
I am sort of too.
I'm excited to see that.
I'm excited. I'm just...
Even though I've been a bastard and I've given you a legit crisis of faith.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how am I supposed to tell people they're worshiping wrong, man? Like, how am I supposed to say, all this time I've been saying, Quailethon is the light, he guides our path, right? But no, not really. It was actually somebody else who was guiding our path, and we were just saying it was Quailethon. Like, how do I tell an entire continent that? So I'm like, it's been a lot of thinking over the last month. A lot of thinking over the last month.
No, I knew I was not going to be very nice to you when I did that. Sorry.
The moral quandaries have just been, and it wasn't even, like, I thought about that at the start. Like, what happens if, this person we were worshiping hasn't been it? But I never really gave it much thought, because the longer we went in, the more Quailethon was there, and the light was always guiding us. And
I waited 27 episodes to spring it on you. Yep.
It's just there was a bunch of moral questions that I had that I was trying to grapple with, because this is the first time I ever played a character like this. So it's like, I wanted to do him justice, but I didn't want to just give him fortune cookie advice, being like, oh, you should be a good person and follow the path Quailethon gives you.
I know sometimes you told me that you didn't feel like you went deep enough.
No, sometimes I didn't.
On some of those conversations and interactions.
Yeah, part of that was just
like spiritually deep enough. Yeah.
Part of that is like, I could have probably gone on for an hour, but we only have 3 hours, and I don't want to monopolize conversations, especially when other people are.
So it should be an hour-long conversation turns into 10 minutes.
Yeah, kind of. But on the other hand, at the end of it, even what I did have, I just didn't feel like I gave it the justice that it needed. Like maybe it was a fortune cookie at that point.
To that point, I'm like constantly racking my brains to try to be as efficient in my storytelling as possible, because that like that's not my natural pace. My natural pace is very stately, almost languid.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Just like it's deep and broad and just kind of we'll get there when we get there. And again, GMing a streaming game 3 hours. It's like this is more like, Netflix episodes where like every single episode something significant has to happen. It doesn't have to be a combat, but like something significant has to, or at least I feel like that. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet, but I'm still.
You're doing a pretty good job regardless.
Still kind of thinking about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, you kind of already started again, once more, anticipated where I was going and started answering the next question, which was, what do you find the most challenging playing Marcus? And so that's part of it right there, is guidance.
Yeah, that was actually a reason to think. It's like, once we had that last game session, I started questioning a lot of the things I did. And I always felt so morally superior to people. I just felt morally superior. I know that's a bad trait to have, and Marcus himself doesn't feel it, but Randy felt morally superior to people. It's just like,
I appreciate you keeping it real, yeah. Well, and you're playing this blessed character. No, I get it, yeah.
So really the hardest part that I'm having at this current point, because I've already accepted that Quailethon or whoever chose him you know? And for a while I was grappling with that. Am I actually worthy enough to do this? And especially when I had to keep having to roll my religion checks to get my stuff going. Like, I was like, okay, let me try this out. But now it's just like a lot of the things that I was so sure about before, have started like finding little cracks and crevices where the water can just go in and just erode it further, you know? And it's like, it's kind of hard for me to try to keep that perspective of, well, maybe Quailithon isn't who I thought he was, but he's still who I choose to believe, you know, or a lot of different things from that point forward. So it's kind of like I'm having to question the easy moral superiority that he just had, you know, because I knew that if I followed Quailithon's path, everything would work out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe all this time I've been praying, I have not been doing it right. And it's kind of like that. It really is that crisis of faith.
No, it is.
We
It's legit. It's a legit crisis.
Probably the hardest thing I've been dealing with since this started. And over the last month, obviously, I've had a lot of time to think. So it's just got a little bit more mucked up and quagmiry. But then after that, beyond that, is balancing how much I want to give to the fellowship, which is a lot, versus how much time I need to give to my family. Like during the fight on the wall, for example, it was like I knew that they were in danger, but I couldn't leave the wall because if I left the wall, that meant that.
Even when you heard the screams. Yeah.
So it's
and
just
you really wanted to leave.
Yeah.
I know.
So it's just like, it was kind of like the balancing act between doing my duty to the fellowship and doing my duty to the family. Which comes first? Well, that's a situational thing. Every time it's going to have to be, well, what's going to help more, you know?
Had any of you left at any of those crucial moments during that battle, they would have come flooding in. I mean, it was, so it's good. It's very good that you stayed there. Conversation for a different time, but there's definitely, it's difficult to know when to, because like if you're going to win a fight, everybody has to be synergizing and like locked in and there, because if people start running, the whole thing collapses quickly.
One little break of morale, and that's everybody.
And then that's it. Yeah. At the same time, if like you make the choice to run, then you have to run. Like as a unit, basically, you have to run. As in with Bend the Knee, where like maybe that was an impossible situation, but like it shows like Wace is just not going to leave Titus. You know,
and Jason wasn't going to leave.
He's not going to leave her.
Yeah.
So. And then it starts this whole chain reaction that goes on. Okay. So, question that I've been asking everybody, I'm going to ask it slightly different for you, for each person, but is gaming an art form? And if so, how would you describe it?
Yes, actually, I do think it's an art form. Good gaming. I mean, we've been bad games before that we're just like, this is crap. But when it's well done, it feels like it's like interactive theater.
Interactive theater.
Yeah, where it's like every person has their own part to play in this grand tapestry that we're building together, and every part is important, you know. So yeah, I do believe it's an art form, and that's kind of how I relate to it with it.
Okay. How do you see it? How do you see it progressing? Right. And how do you see it progressing?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. Like, I mean, we're always kind of evolving gaming systems to be better, easier, more user-friendly. But really, I would say that as our understanding of storytelling has improved over the years, like all the shows that have come on and all the different storylines that have gone on through all those different shows.
So you do think it's improved then?
I do.
You see an upward trend?
Yes.
Okay. Because some people would argue the opposite.
I think that where I work, when I'm not doing Darkport, there are probably about 10 or so different people that talk about Dungeons & Dragons on a regular basis.
Quite a few.
Yeah. And one person starting their own vampire game. We've got 4 different D&D games. Everybody wants to talk about their character. Everybody likes the idea of a really good flowing story.
Jacob, who played with us on the Leptis Regium game, is there too. Yeah, running his own campaign. And I'm a bit of a mentor for him right now, and I would one day love to see him at the head of this table running something.
He would probably enjoy that, actually, very much so. I just think that when a group of players actually love what they do and love being in the world that they're embodying, that the trend can only go up from that point. There's a certain onus on the storyteller and the GM
Absolutely.
to actually give them a world that they can work with, right? But just as much, it's just as vital that Nalishli, Merrick, Titus, me, everybody, we all do our part in forming this beautiful story that has nuance and depth to it, and that makes you think about things critically. Because a lot of times I don't see, well, with the games that didn't really do well for me in the past, it was just there was no real critical thinking to it. You know, so it's like as storylines get better and more evolved, and television becomes better and more evolved, people start watching that and digesting it. That sparks their own imagination on what they can do with these things, and then they just move it along to that point. I think that it will get much better.
So I hope you're right. One of my central premises for Darkport is better stories, better humans. Mm-hmm. I've said that, now in-person lectures. I've said that on camera before, and it is really one of my core beliefs as far as the power of storytelling, goes, like why humans are doing this, because we've been telling stories since we figured out sounds that could represent ideas. Mm-hmm. And since we had a campfire to sit around, we've been, making up yarns for basically, I think it's one of our quintessential traits as humans is that we tell each other stories.
I agree.
So, is there anything else that we've missed? Character-wise, gaming-wise, player-wise, your experience, anything at all?
I appreciate the cast that you have brought together. Both the back of house and the front of house. It feels like every single person that's at this table brings something specific and unique to them. Whether it's Titus's like martial abilities or just his need to defend us, or Tatiana's ability to just pull at that yarn until something, even if she never tells us, right? Even if she never tells us.
Love you, Tots. Yeah,
for real. You've assembled a very, very cohesive cast, and I can appreciate that on a great level. Like, again, I've played in games that it was just sort of hodgepodge put together, and there was a lot of thought with who you wanted at this table.
There was.
I can tell that. And as the back of house expands on top of that, it's like there's a lot of thought in who's going to there. And everybody that we 100%. Bring in is just really good. Man, they're just really, really good. And I love this game. Like I love this game. There's times that Donnie and I will be hanging out, and we're just sitting there for like 2 hours talking about one specific facet, trying to like work through it, Or Corey and I will sit there, or all three of us will get together and just like, and it's like that to me is the hallmark of a good game. It's when you can sit there for hours on your off time and just talk.
I mean, like Donnie's a pro. He will drill and drill and drill on the lore, on the names, on what he needs to know for his character, like all of that stuff. I've seen him do it. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he gets here early and he's drilling here. Sometimes he's doing it the day before. But no, it's a little weird to use this word in this context, but there is a level of professionalism of seriousness to it in a good way. Hopefully not self-serious, but just of really getting in there and trying to develop these characters, develop this world, tell this tale to the person's best ability. I mean, that's one of the reasons Anika was so damn good in her job, in that role. She had charts and graphs and all kinds of stuff. She still she had a book that if she thought of things like going to sleep or going awake or whatever, she would write it down. I mean, just things like that. She actually, I just saw her the other day, and she told me she still has that book by her bedside. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, that beautiful, beautiful line, this heartbreaking line with Figulus Neus of "I hope you find your peace."
Yeah,
which is probably the last words those characters will ever speak to each other. That's how the relationship ends. It's a hell of a place to end. Mm-hmm. It's a hell of a place to end.
I've been very impressed with Nalishli's growth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just like watching her from nothing, literally from nothing, tasting dandelions for the first time, or picking up a weapon that is semi-sentient, well, maybe fully sentient, and the fact that Allie as a player herself is so new to any kind of RP, you know? But it's just like, I've been really impressed by just about everybody.
What, I'm gonna indulge my curiosity a little bit because I really won't have another chance to ask you this on camera, I don't think. How does it feel different? I mean, obviously, having Anika gone, especially when your characters were just getting, and she agreed with me when I met with her, like that would have been a very that relationship was going to be fascinating, you know, between those two characters.
I was really looking forward to that.
You had just gotten to that point finally where you were communicating that way. But with her gone and with Tobias at the table, obviously he's playing an antagonist right now. He's not always going to be playing an antagonist, but he's definitely playing that character. Definitely playing that character. What does it feel like? What is the tenor of the room, or what does the dynamic at the table feel like now to you, as it stands currently in this iteration of Darkport?
With Toby as an antagonist, it feels tense because I never know what he's planning on doing. And with a lot of the other characters, I played with him long enough to know that Titus is probably going to take the direct approach. Same thing for Nalishli. Tatiana is going to go around like water. I'll probably hold back until I know a little bit more. With him, he's such an unknown person right now, but he's playing him so well. Like there's a certain level of greasy ickiness to him that I both admire, and I'm just like, oh man. And to me, that's a hallmark of an excellent player who can go through a lot of different like subtypes and character concepts and just effortlessly move through.
I mean, his own mother said that his character was sinister.
And he does quite well at that. I would say, I don't know, it's
because it's different. It feels different to me in the room.
The tenor of the room right now with him at the table.
Yeah.
I mean, considering what we're in the process of doing and everything like that, it feels strained just with him there. With him as a different character who's more on our side that we actually have complete and utter trust in, that will be a lot different, I'm sure.
So ask you in a year?
Yeah, I guess so, because it'll probably take us that long, right? Although everything else, it seems like, you know, the betrayal aside, the betrayal of, I can't think of his name right now.
Capio.
No.
Avad.
The Vorn guy.
Barolos.
Yeah, Barolos. The betrayal of that aside, I think that everybody has been doing quite a bit to really get us through this adventure. Like between Tatiana and Capio's conversation with
That's a good point.
The way that Titus was able to immediately like counteract the idea that we're all about to be attacked by all these skeletons. And he's just like, I'm going to talk to you from patrician to patrician. And he was the only person who could have done that and gotten us out of that situation. Yeah. Like the way Merrick is just, he's really on fire with his like scouting and understanding of things. Like he's getting there. And
Merrick's been on, he's been on point this whole, basically since you guys got here, because he had to be.
I appreciate him pushing back on me. Because again, that moral superiority thing has been shaken, and at the time I was really into it. I feel like you did this wrong, but then he's pushing back. I'm just like, you know what? Great, that's good conversation that we can have about this that I wouldn't have had elsewise. So,
well, I mean, it would be very boring if all the characters had the identical perspectives on things. I mean, and that'd be also completely unrealistic. These should be very different characters,
and they feel like very different characters. You know,
they're not fungible. You shouldn't be able to swap one out for the other and have the scene run the same. That would be, to me, that would be the mark of I would have failed as a game master if that was how the game ran.
That's fair.
You know.
But you haven't. But you haven't. I don't know. It's just it feels good. I mean, honestly, I still wish Anika was here playing with us.
I do.
Yeah, because she
added Tobias, but yeah.
And she added something that was very important to our cohesiveness. Like there was the lore mistress, and there's a religious leader, and there's a marshal.
Well, and I'll tell you. I mean, I say this knowing that Toby corrected my own continuity in that 7-year game more than any player ever has in 40 years of me running games. So when I say this is advisedly, spoken, I really mean it. But Anika was, as far as I can remember, and having gone back and even in the own interview I did with her, she was flawless, and I do not use that word lightly. I think she was 100% lore accurate. Every single time that she had a piece of lore that she asserted as a fact, it actually was a fact. There was zero distortion or garblement or telephone game or anything.
I appreciate that.
That I can't do that as a player, you know? So like having someone else take a world that I made and like immerse themselves to that degree and then bring it back out was remarkable. I feel like you have done something, you are in the process of doing something very similar. It's more subjective, obviously, because it's spiritual, but you're in the process of doing something very similar from a spiritual perspective. Like you really are figuring out the rules of the metaphysics of this world right now.
It's exciting. It's very exciting.
Even when you've been wrong, you still have learned, I believe, from every experiment and every attempt, you know? All right. I mean, we could just gab for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I think I will reluctantly leave it there, Randy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming, my dear and brilliant friend.
We love you, babes.
You too. Oh, faraway friends, that has been us in conversation with Randy Ruiz, who plays Marcus. I hope you have found this interesting. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. And as you go on about your journey out there, stay safe and stay curious. Thank you very much.
Have a good day, guys. Be safe.